hope you're doing well. We've got another White Dwarf nostalgia trip for you today. We are looking at White Dwarf 195 this time. Last time we looked at March 1986 and 1991. I have to double check those dates because obviously we've just turned into a new year and I'm not used to saying the new years yet, but I think that's right, 86 and 91, and this is 96, so the 10th year on, and we're looking at these ones separately. You'll notice this one is a lot more dog-eared, a lot more flipped through, because these ones, the mid-90s ones, are the ones that I have kept from my childhood collection. So I have lots of personal memories for these, so they deserve their own they deserve their own video. So we're going to take a look at this one now. Here we have on the cover Mark Gibbons painting, lovely painting here of Dark Angel's Chaplain Asmodai. Or is it? Or is it? We will discover in possibly future episodes whether this is Asmodai or not. Certainly it says on the inside cover of this one that it is. And this inside cover here, as you may see from this missing bit here, this was a fold-out cover, and I can't remember. I can't remember what was on that cover, but whatever it was, I either cut it off, because this is very clean. This isn't like a rip, I don't think, or I opened it so much that it came off. So I don't know what that was, but the second half of the Apocalypse roadshow bit event thing. Yes, is missing. Anyway, enough of this. Let us go onto the inside. Actually, first of all, I'm going to say a bit about this particular magazine, because this is one of those magazines that I had from my childhood, and that conjures up a very particular event in my mind when I was reading this. I think I was going to the orthodontist to have my brace made. I think that's where I was when I got this, because I was reading it in the waiting room and in the car on the way back, and the car broke down. So what I remember very vividly is breaking down on the side of the dual carriageway coming back from Bournemouth to my home near Ringwood, and having to scramble up over some banks because the car had broken down. I don't know what happened, and we pulled into the lay-by, but mobile phones obviously weren't a thing, so we had to go and try and find a phone. So we had to scramble over the bank of what was then newly planted trees, and is now very, very definitely a dense thicket that we wouldn't be able to have got through. So my mum and I clambered through this dense thicket in the pissing down rain. And it was getting dark, and we were stomping around, and we found a caravan park that was completely deserted. We wandered everywhere around this park, knocked on all the offices, all the caravans, no one was in. Then we found there was a dog kennels or something, and that was empty. And eventually we went to a garage, and there was nobody at the garage. I think it was a used car sales place, but in an old garage rather than a petrol garage. And then, yes, we went to this dog kennel place, and there was somebody in, and we managed to go in there and sit and wait for the AA to come and pick us up and drive us back down to Bournemouth to pick up the road to come back up again. And the car was still there, nobody had driven into the back of it, which was nice. And they fixed it fairly promptly, and we were okay from that point, but it was a bit of a mission. Anyhow, I imagine this, I remember very clearly this being the issue that was keeping me entertained throughout that period. So there you go, a little personal story about this issue of White Dwarf. Just going to skip through loads of stuff because there's fun stuff here, but there's more fun stuff further on. Okay, here we have Jez Goodwin sculpting Centurius, the Legion of the Damned special character for the Apocalypse event, which was the 100th Game Store opening, 100th Games Workshop store opening, and they put out this Legion of the Damned model, and I think this is a really cool model. I didn't get it at the time because I wasn't into 40k, and I'm still not that into 40k, but I do think this is a cool model that I'd like to paint up at some point, but they're now, of course, extremely expensive. What I was not aware of then, but am now aware of, is what this darkened putty means in here, which is that this model, or parts of this model, have already been baked. So at least part of this model has already gone into a mould and had a cast taken of it. So whether this is a previous Space Marine body that has then been sort of rescued for its pose to cut down on the amount of sculpting that has to be done, you know, working up from an armature, or whether it's the case that it was a body that was made for a dolly and that they've just used that rather than a casting of the dolly. I don't know, but it certainly looks like this is being worked over the top of something that has previously undergone the moulding process, which is interesting. Also interesting, to me as a sculptor anyway, Jez here is using a number of sort of different clay tools and tools that I use very similarly, so that's good to see. But also his green stuff here is very green, and that may be the photography, but it also suggests that he's mixing quite a heavy amount of blue in. I've seen a lot of people sculpt with very yellow putty, where they've clearly not wanted to put too much of the blue in because that extends the setting time and also makes it softer and more malleable. Here it looks like Jez is using quite a firm, dense putty, and maybe I would speak to him about it and ask for some some ideas and some suggestions if he wasn't quite so anti-sculpting in the old-fashioned way. Well, not anti-sculpting in the old-fashioned way, but I know unfortunately he's not a big fan of the old hammer, inverted commas, style, which is a shame. Anyway, here's rules for using Centurious, so that you can go along to the Apocalypse event and pick yourself up one. There was a tournament in 1996. Some people went. Here are people playing the tournament. It still looks more interesting than a modern 40k tournament with all of its stock laser cut terrain on both sides, but it's not the kind of game that I'm particularly interested in, although this army we'll get to look at in a future edition, and it is very cool. Some clarification by Tox. Tox? I'm not sure who Tox is. I don't think I've ever sort of clocked before. Who's Tox? It's not one of the regular team. Anyway, apparently some people have been having some issues with overcoming the effects of frenzy in 4th edition Fantasy Battle, and some unscrupulous players have been encouraging misrepresentations of the rules. So here is a clarification of the rules, and here are some tactics for dealing with specific frenzied troops. Here is that Apocalypse 100th store, the 100th store, Games Workshop Warrington. It looks like a McDonald's or a KFC. Was it good? Did you go? Is it still there? But it doesn't look like that anymore. Let us know if you have fond memories of the Apocalypse 100 event in March of 1996. We have Spire Hunters for Necromunda. I remember these being very cool when I picked up my copy of Battleground, the Trinity White Wolf miniatures game, which is staring at me on the shelf saying, "You still haven't played me, painted me or anything." That was, I did paint my first edition, I should say. I did paint and play that game a lot, but I gave that one away, and I now have replaced it with another one which I haven't yet painted or played. But that game I found cheaply in a sci-fi shop in Bournemouth, and that I could afford, whereas Necromunda I couldn't afford. So Battleground became my stand-in Necromunda game, and I used to run a Spire team made up for Battleground. That was what I did. I still like Battleground. I think I've done a video on it, or I've at least talked about it. It's a great game. Shame it didn't get more support. But yes, here are the various Spire types. They're a bit of a departure from the brat gangs of Confrontation, but they're all quite cool, and I like the concept that these are sort of privileged Spire youngsters who are going to learn some combat training or just going to have some sport with those expendable underhivers. Yeah, I think it's a cool rite of passage that they've come up with, and I like the various sort of very specific types of Spira that they've come up with here. They were extremely powerful to play against. It was really hard, I remember, but they also didn't advance in the same way. So they were hard, very, very hard for beginner gangs, and then slightly less hard for very experienced gangs. Whereas the Spiras didn't really step up. Instead, their sort of tech got slowly degraded, so they actually got worse. So you went in hard and fast, and then you got out of there. And said, hey, look, I did it, I survived, now let me have my privileged rank. So if you wanted to take down the Spiras, it was a really good way of all of the other gangs getting together to take these guys out. So if you had a campaign, and I think this is why they were probably brought into Outlanders, apart from being a cool concept, if you had a campaign where there was a big discrepancy between the gangs that were doing really well and the gangs that were doing really badly, if you threw Spiras into the mix, everyone turned against the Spiras, everyone got experience, but proportionately the starting gangs, or the gangs that have been doing less well, would have got more experience out of it because of the difference in ratings between the Spira gang and them. So it was a good way of leveling up everyone in a campaign and getting everyone to a level point, and then the Spiras nipping out again, being got rid of again, because they would get worse as the game goes on. So even given to a games master who's running the campaign to run, I'm pretty sure that's what their role was supposed to be. Anyhow, enough on that. Ancient writings. This is following on from a few scenarios which were in the previous edition, which were based on events from history. Drew influence from historical battles. So this is looking at a classic historical battle, Custer's Last Stand. Here's their quick overview of what really happened, and then you've got a 40k Custarius Last Stand, a fantasy battle, Schuster's Last Stand, and an epic battle, Custer with a K. Custer in this case being an orc. I think this is the only instance where Custer is not a human character. Custer's Last Stand against the Eldar. So you've got three different takes on the same scenario, which is interesting to read the comparative between them. Here's the Q&A. Oh look, here's a question about Asmodee. Isn't the model listed as being Asmodee in page 41 of the heavy metal section of the Codex really Saffron? Asmodee on the cover, clearly listed as Asmodee by Mark Gibbons here, but the question is because Saffron is described as having a power sword, which the model clearly has, and which this painting clearly has, whereas Asmodee carries the Blades of Reason instead. I guess it's not in his war gear listing that he has a power sword. So doesn't that mean that a character wearing the robes of Grandmaster and carrying a power sword is Saffron instead? Well, he's got his Crozius Arcanum, is that what that's called? The little macy wandy sceptre thing, and he's got a big tome here, and he's got the kind of skull face that you associate with the chaplain. So I'm not sure that really holds weight. But if you're looking purely at the war gear, I'm sure you could paint Asmodee as Saffron. I'm sure that would work absolutely fine. But the explanation in here is simply that the sculptor decided that they wanted Asmodee to have a power sword because it looked better than the tiny little interrogative things that are understood as being the Blades of Reason. So permission was given for them to give him a power sword. So there. So it is Asmodee. That's cleared that up. A bit of discussion of Space Marine commanders. What's missing from here? You might be able to see the remains of a Skaven, the picture from the Skaven Codex Army book front here. What's missing from here is the warp fire generator tile and another tile for playing this Skaven specific scenario for Warhammer Quest, and this did get cut out and did get used alongside my Advanced Hero Quest, not Warhammer Quest, but alongside my Advanced Hero Quest stuff, and I thought it was a wonderful tile and it got a lot of use, and I sort of modified various rules that are in here. There you go, Kurik's Warp Fire Generator. And all of this stuff on fielding it and fighting Quirk and stuff got modified and generally just played with, and it was a wonderful, wonderful encounter. Thank you very much whoever wrote this. I guess they didn't want to create a Skaven pack. They realised that the Orc and the Undead pack, which have been out for a little while, were maybe not selling as well as they'd hoped. So the Chaos Dwarf one and the Skaven one were aborted. Originally there was going to be a Skaven mechanic model for this. That's an unreleased model, but you do see it floating around from time to time. Skaven with a big spanner across his back that I guess was supposed to be Quirk, although to my mind this is always what Quirk looks like. And so that got put in this one, and the Chaos Dwarf one will be featured in a future article. It also means that the rat golem, this weird creation here that's part rat, part machine, that never got a figure created for it either, because the pack was shelved before that was made, which is sad because I'd have liked to see what they come up with. But these cool Andy Jones and who is it, Gav Thorpe's conversions for playtesting and trying out ideas, I think are very cool examples of what it might have looked like had it happened. The I don't know if you remember from previous 40k battle reports that we've covered in this series, there was a big landing pad. Apparently that proved very popular. Lots of letters were sent in saying, can you tell us how to make one? And they said, oh no, we can't, we didn't take any photos and we're not going to make another one. But what we will do is put out this card building which uses the Necromunda bulkheads. So this is the first excellent use of those wonderful resources, which I still like for building random card structures for games. I still think they add a great sort of 3D element to them. The Imperial Firebase was the first of those, the Bastion of course coming out a bit later, and here it is in its unpainted glory. Yeah, what a great terrain kit. Good use of those bulkheads. Still love those bulkheads. And some scenarios, of course, to play on it. Last month we looked at woods. Now we're going to look at rivers. Again, Owen Branham is going to give us an overview. Here's the simple cloth river, and then his own sort of modular river pieces. In fact, down here I still have a bunch of vac-formed river sections that I made using this same principle, so layering up MDF, then I textured it and then I vac-formed over it to give this kind of clear resin bottom, and then I'm going to backfill, or the idea is to backfill here with a riverbed, so you've got a bit of clarity, put some texture over the water, decorate these. Anyway, I did loads of these, and at one point this was going to be a sort of oak bound product that I could sell, but I couldn't find a vacuum form company that could do them cheaply enough, and it was going to be too much work for me to do them individually, so that didn't happen. But I've got a bunch of those, but they're very much inspired by this principle, and I think most of the cast resin rivers that I've seen are also based on this principle, that you just build up the river banks and it looks kind of like the water sits below, like this. But Nigel Stillman is going to talk about modular rivers, which are of course much cooler. And look, here's another board by the Perrys. I have agents looking for that crag board before. I think this is the same board as seen previously from a slightly more elevated angle, so I think these crags are the same as the ones in the previous thing. So this board is, I think, another picture of the one that I'm looking for. I've had agents in the Perry's room scouting it around. They can't find it, so maybe it got damaged at some point, or maybe it's too it's too fancy for the historical games that they play much of these days. They did find the other crag board that was in the other one though, so maybe more on that later. An industrial river. This is awesome. This is another Perry board, but apparently this was created for a one-off battle, so I don't know. this one still exists either, but it's very cool. Like it a lot. I'm going to be doing a coastal beach very soon for my Salute board, so interesting to see that. And I liked seeing these. So these are also Nigel Stillman tiles, but these are Nigel Stillman tiles, I should say. The others aren't, but this is still Nigel Stillman talking about them, and these are his tiles. It's interesting to see how thin these are compared to the Perry's modules. These are just very thin sheets of plywood, sort of built up on top, and the edges not finished, so that you can see exactly how they're made up. But they're very cool. There's lots of textures and things. And I love the bulrushes and the little animals and things around the corner. That's what really makes terrain for me. Here's some stuff about orders for the Imperial Guard and a couple of Imperial Guard characters. Here's some stuff on making a games club. I had a games club, the Alderholt Warhammer Club, which had, I think, maybe 6 members at its peak. Yeah, some of my closest friends at school were that. They probably don't want to be reminded about it now, though. Here is an image that we should remember for next month, and I will explain why. Or is it? I can't even remember. Have we seen it, or is it on the next month one? Anyway, you may have seen this in last week's video, or it may be on the cover of next month's magazine. I'm getting so confused. Anyway, yes, again, another instance of this cropping up at 5 or 10 year intervals, 5 year intervals. It wasn't around in the 80s for sure. This is the entire Ultramarines chapter, and you look at it and you go, yeah, actually that's not many. You know, I could make an entire Ultramarines chapter, or paint an entire Ultramarines chapter. It's a lot of rhinos. I probably wouldn't bother with that, but in terms of the figures, it's not that many squads. Oh wait, over the page here, there's more. There's loads of them, flipping loads of them. So this was on display at the Games Day that I went to. Games Day 96 was the one that I actually went to, and all of these models were out. Each store, I think, was basically given a squad and asked to paint a squad and contribute a squad to it. They were all very basically painted. I mean, you can't see the quality from this far away, but trust me, they were people who actually painted them may object, but to my young eyes at least, they looked like they had been sprayed Ultramarines blue, maybe had a black wash and some colour put around the edges, and that's about it. There was not a whole lot of certainly heavy metal style highlighting and shading going on here. They were pretty simplistic, but notable because this is the first appearance of the Thunderhawk gunship, the infamous metal Thunderhawk gunship kit. There were 3 of them here that were assembled. Given how much hassle it seems to take to build one, I'm amazed that they managed to build 3 in metal. They must weigh an absolute ton. But those obviously then, I think it may even have been at that Games Day, there were a few of them for sale. A limited number in those nice wooden boxes signed, and they are now an extremely valuable collectible item, but probably not many people have actually built them because they're such a pain in the backside. They're so heavy to put together. Mike McVeigh's Heavy Metal Masterclass looks at some more open competition entries. There's a very cool pit fighter here by Paul Muller, rebuilt from a Goliath fighter based on this John Blanche illustration. And Ali Morrison's conversion of Trish Morrison's Durthu, who hadn't actually come out at this point. He must have got an advanced cast to paint up in what became actually the colour scheme of the eventual one when it did come out. Interesting to see that this one has little blue sprites bouncing around the base. When they redid the Treeman kit for, I think, was it 6th or 7th edition, they included little blue plastic sprites and creatures to sit on it. And another cool Mike McVeigh diorama. This one is in Warhammer World, or it certainly was the last time I was there. And really cool that they are giving, at this point, Mike McVeigh just free rein to make dioramas. As I understand it, he was getting a bit dissatisfied looking after the heavy metal team and painting lots of stuff. So they just said, well, you know, make us some cool dioramas for an article in White Dwarf. And he went, okay, all right, and had free reign for a year or so to do lots of cool dioramas. So good company at that in that respect. Obviously a valued employee, and he came up with some really good snippets, scenes from the Warhammer worlds. And here is obviously very on trend, it being Azrael, Grandmaster of the Dark Angels, in the Dome of the Rock, not the Dome of the Rock, the Dome in the Rock, with this sort of stained glass chapel and various other things explaining how he came about, posing stuff, and the building and the painting of it. A Warhammer battle report. High Elves, Imric versus Egrim Van Horseman. Trying to find out, actually, although Imric's the big dragon, Egrim's the big dragon, this is really about Teclis and Egrim trying to work out who is the most powerful wizard after the article on wizards last month. It's not extremely conclusive. There's a good scene of dragons having a fight, but from a magic perspective, they both pull their weight, and the outcome is only 1 point different, even with the rest of the armies thrown in. So, not very decisive. Here we have Spirers and Mad Donna Eulanti, and some Colin Dixon Skaven, beginning to replace the Jez Goodwin ones. Here's Imric, so you can have him on his cool dragon. We saw Egrim last month. Some Beastmen, those Blood Angels special characters, a Dark Angels specific Dreadnought, and then the conversion kits for the plastic Dreadnought. Talon Desert Riders, Raiders, not Riders, Mordian Iron Guard, Chekhov and Al Rahim, the Outlanders supplement, and on the back another classic image, certainly to my mind anyway. When you think of 4th edition, I think of these Skaven pouring out of the holes in the cliff to fight the Chaos Dwarfs. That's very much an image that comes to my mind, sits ingrained within my memory. There you go. I hope you have enjoyed that little trip, nostalgia trip down memory lane, and look at this White Dwarf. If you haven't seen it before, even maybe hope you've seen something that you like, and I will catch you again next week. Take care.